Hare Krishna, everyone. One of the things I've been keen to do over the last 18 months is to share what different sanghas, what different mats in the worldwide Hare Krishna family are doing in terms of their programs, in terms of their preaching, and in terms of their outreach. It's so important that we can learn from one another. It's so important that we can understand people's differences, people's different expectations and different ways of doing things. When I set out on this journey over a year ago to do a proper analytical comparative study of the Hare Krishna movement in the UK, I was keen to see just what was going on the ground. My own background's in ISKCON. I see what ISKCON's doing. I know what ISKCON's doing. I know that when Srila Prabhupada came to the West in 1965, he did so with that very strong focus of reaching out to Western people. Krishna consciousness had been held in India for hundreds of years, thousands of years. There was a renaissance in the 19th century, in the 1800s, of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which was then passed on to his son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who founded the Gaudiya Mat in 1918. And the Gaudiya Mat spread all over India. 65 mats were set up. But there was always a really strong focus, as prophesized, to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, to reach out to people in Russia, in Germany, in Africa, in Mexico, in Canada, and share these gems, these teachings that had been contained in India for so long, and to share them with the rest of the world. There is a term that some people have used over the last few years, which is the Hinduisation of ISKCON. So, what do we mean by that? Basically, when people use it, they're using it to refer to how ISKCON, in certain countries, largely Western countries, is developing Hindu traits or Hindu activities to appeal to Hindu people. And one of the things that I know a number of devotees are keen to do is to try and keep that essence that Srila Prabhupada brought to the West in the 1960s. In Srila Prabhupada's Pranan mantra, it talks about Srila Prabhupada being the saviour of the Western world. We're reminded often about Srila Prabhupada coming to the West, that pilgrimage he took on the cargo ship in 1965 to take Krishna consciousness and spread it with Western people. Any organisation, whether religious, spiritual, philosophical or not, will always go through changes. It will always go through different traits, different fads, different phases in terms of the way it appears and the way it looks and the way it does things. A number of people today will refer to the Hinduisation of ISKCON. And that literally means how in some parts of the Western world, ISKCON is becoming quite Hindu in terms of the events that it organises, in terms of the activities that it does, in terms of some devotees, not all, taking maybe some culture from Hinduism and presenting it as Krishna consciousness, when in fact it is not. So, for example, I don't know, I could be wrong, I've been wrong many times before. I'm not aware that certainly in the West that Srila Prabhupada celebrated Diwali. As wonderful as Diwali is, I'm not sure it was a festival that Srila Prabhupada certainly prioritised or encouraged his disciples to mark, like he would do with Janmashtami and Gaurapanim, the appearance day of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I've seen, certainly over the last 10 years, how ISKCON has really struggled to attract Western people. I remember about 2 years ago in Scotland, I was talking to a sannyasi, an ISKCON sannyasi, and I think maybe it was 3 years ago, and I'd just been initiated. And he said to me, this sannyasi, I won't say his name, this ISKCON sannyasi said to me, you can probably, I don't want to misquote him or misphrase him, he said you can probably count on one hand the number of Western people who have joined the movement and gone through to kind of first initiation. So, Diksha initiation, accepted a guru, been given some beads, chanting 16 rounds a day. He said you can probably count on one hand in terms of, the number of Western people that had joined in the last decade. And I felt really sad in one sense by that conversation, because I then spent a few hours trying to work out in my head the number of Western people that I know who had joined ISKCON and who had kind of taken it through to that initial step of first initiation in ISKCON. Obviously, you know, the teachings of ISKCON come from an area of the world that we call India. The geographical boundaries of India have changed a bit over the centuries, but ultimately it's still an area of the world that we now know is India. So a lot of my friends and family who are not Hare Krishnas, who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, will see and think that I've joined some Hindu group or I've joined some Hindu organization. So based on my own experience and background in ISKCON, I made the assumption that this is the challenge that all different Gaudiya Vaishnava groups have in the Western world. You'll know that I've identified at least 20 different Hare Krishna groups in the UK that are active in some way or another. Those are 20 groups that stem from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And then there's at least 6 Babajis from the Nityananda Prabhu Janavi Mata line that have disciples in the UK. And in terms of London, let's just talk about London for a moment. You've got ISKCON, and then you've got 3 other organizations, Gaudiya Vaishnava organizations that have temples. So ISKCON has got at least 2 temples, 3 temples. They've got the Manor, they've got Soho Street, and they've got South London as well. And there's a number of kind of temples that Parashuram also runs, or Parashuram Prabhu, the director of Food for All, that he runs as well. So ISKCON has a number of temples in London. Secondly, you've got the Sri Chaitanya Sarasat Mat, which has got 2 temples, one in East London, one in West London. Then you've got the International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society, which runs Ganga Matas in Waltham Forest. That is called Ganga Matas in the Narayan Maharaj group. And then the 4th Hare Krishna organisation with temples in London is the Gaudiya Mission UK, which has a temple in Willesden. So 4 different groups, if you like, Sanghas in the Sarasvat line, have buildings or temples in the capital of the UK, in London. So what's quite interesting, for me anyway, other people might not find it interesting at all, some people might not be interested. When I've attended programs at all of those temples, by the way, and what I found really intriguing is, you know, when we go to the Manor, we will see a lot of people of Indian heritage, which is great. And India's been going to the Manor and have been a part of the story of the Manor since it opened in 1973. So I was really intrigued to find out, therefore, that if you go to the Ganga Matas temple run by the International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society in Waltham Forest, and if you also go to the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Centre in Feltham, there are literally no Indians. There are no people of Indian heritage. And I was really intrigued by that, because most of my experiences in ISKCON involve people of Indian heritage, and it would appear to be, therefore, and this is something that maybe ISKCON can learn from, is those 2 other groups are really successful at reaching out to Western people. In terms of the community at the Bhakti Yoga Institute in Feltham, next to Heathrow Airport, it is predominantly a white community. And also, if you go to the Ganga Matas Centre, which is also not ISKCON, it is predominantly a very young Western community as well. So this issue of the Hinduisation of ISKCON isn't actually the case in other mats as well. And I just think that's something that we can learn from and something that we can try and understand. The Gaudiya Mission UK is kind of in a different category of its own. I went to the Gaudiya Mission UK about a year ago. This was the one that was founded by the devotees who came to London in the 1930s. If you go to Gaudiya Mission UK in Google or in Facebook, you'll find a link to the temple. And when there's no pandemic, you're allowed to visit. That is very different. That is predominantly a Bengali community, and I was the only non-Bengali when I went to visit a year ago. So I've always been keen to see different mats and different sanghas work together. We're all in this together. We're all trying to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. Not me personally in terms of over the world, but I'm trying to do my small little bit. And I would really encourage devotees in ISKCON that are particularly watching this or will watch this film, just for a few moments to look up the Bhakti Yoga Institute in Feltham, run by the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat, and look up Ganga Matas, which is more East London, run by the International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society, and just see what they're doing in terms of outreach, in terms of preaching, in terms of trying to attract local Western people, Londoners, to join their programmes. So that's it. That's kind of my 2 cents worth for today. The Hinduisation and Indianisation of ISKCON, is it a challenge for other mats? And the answer would appear to be no.